Today I want to take a moment to address a question I got from a viewer, and the question was about guide rods. They wanted to know why some guns come with plastic guide rods, some guns come with metal guide rods. They were curious as to why I change all my guide rods out to metal if they do come with plastic. They wanted to know, are the plastic ones safe and reliable, or do they need to change to the metal? And they basically just wanted to know what guide rods actually do. So I thought I'd take a moment here today to answer those questions. Now, first, they're right. Some guns do come with plastic guide rods, such as my CZP-01 here. It comes with a plastic guide rod. It's not even a thick plastic guide rod. It's a very thin, little flimsy plastic guide rod. And some guns come with metal guide rods, like my SIG P227 here. As you can see there, it has a fairly substantial metal guide rod. Although this is not a solid guide rod, it's actually hollow. There's basically three types of guide rods. There's plastic guide rods, there's hollow metal guide rods, and there's solid metal guide rods. As you can see here, this is a plastic guide rod from Beretta, not magnetic. Here's a hollow metal guide rod from Beretta, and as you can see here, it is magnetic, but it is, like I said, hollow. You can actually more easily see that it's hollow here on this stainless one because you can see the little black pin right there. That's basically just holding this cap inside of this tube. This is a hollow metal guide rod. Now this is a solid metal guide rod. As you can see, it is magnetic. There's no pins or anything here. This is one solid piece. It's solid all the way through. Now I thought today would be a perfect day to actually do this video because I'm changing out the hollow metal guide rod from my Beretta 92 Inox with this solid stainless guide rod. This all stainless guide rod was actually sent to me by Actions by T. Teddy Jacobson, I believe, is the owner over there, and he makes this all stainless steel guide rod for the Beretta, and I'm going to put it in my 92 Inox today. But before I do that, let's answer some of the questions about guide rods. The first one being, are plastic guide rods safe and reliable? Do you have to change them out? No, you do not have to change them out. Plastic guide rods are totally safe, totally reliable. They are plenty strong and they get the job done just fine. I think one of the main issues people have when they think about guide rods is they labor under the misconception that the guide rod actually somehow guides the slide backwards. It gives the slide a path to travel on. The guide rods do not do that. Your slide is guided by rails. Your guide rod has no significant effect on how your slide moves. In fact, I kind of think guide rods are misnamed. I don't think they should be called guide rods. I think they should be called spring rods or spring guides because basically all they do is guide the spring. They provide a support for the spring so it doesn't kink or bind inside the action of your gun while your slide is cycling. That's all they do. They just keep this spring, your recoil spring, where it needs to be, keep it from binding up, kinking up, or getting out of place inside your slide while your gun is working. And the metal ones here do that just as well. They just give the spring a path to travel on without binding. The biggest difference between the two is weight. As you can see here, the plastic guide rod is actually only 0.1 ounces, a tenth of an ounce. The hollow metal guide rod is 0.7 ounces, so it's nearly 3/4 of an ounce. Whereas the solid metal guide rod is an ounce, sometimes a little bit heavier even. So you might ask yourself, why use plastic guide rods at all? That's not a very big difference in weight. Well, when you're making a product where an ounce makes a difference, say if you're carrying a duty rig and you've got a dozen things on your belt and each of them are an ounce or two heavier, well, you're carrying an extra pound by the end of the day there. So sometimes a half an ounce or an ounce makes a big difference. Plus, plastic guide rods are much cheaper to produce. So these are much less expensive than these and they work just as well. One thing I will say about the plastic guide rods, in all of my 42 years of shooting, I don't know if I've ever seen a guide rod fail personally. Now, I've seen other people show me cases where their guide rod failed, and usually there was another underlying cause, like something else was wrong that caused it. Sometimes improper installation of the guide rod, or a bad spring, or a cracked slide rail, something like that. I've never seen a guide rod just fail because it failed. Usually there's something else going on, because guide rods really don't take any pressure. In fact, some people will say plastic guide rods have one advantage. If you drop your handgun with the slide back and it lands barrel down, you could potentially bend a metal guide rod, which would interfere with the function of your gun. With a plastic guide rod, you won't have that problem. But I think the chance of bending your metal guide rod is pretty slim. I think the chance of shattering a plastic guide rod is probably just as big under different circumstances. But both of those problems are something that are so remote, I wouldn't worry about either one of them. Use whichever one you like. I obviously like all metal guide rods. I've got them all over the place here. I've got them for several different guns sitting around that I haven't gotten around to replacing yet, and some that I have for guns I don't even have yet. And today I'm going to put this one in my Beretta. So there you see the new guide rod in my Beretta Inox, and I really do like the looks of that better. But you know, looks aren't the only change when you add an all-metal guide rod like this. When I change a plastic guide rod to a metal guide rod, I gain anywhere between a ½ ounce and an ounce. When I change a hollow metal guide rod to a solid metal guide rod, I gain another ½ of an ounce or more. That gives me more weight in the front of the gun, makes the gun balance better, in my opinion. So that's a really valid reason to change your guide rod to metal. If you like a little more weight out front, that will give you a little more weight. Now the difference is minimal, but it's still there. And if you got it in your head that there's a difference, you might notice the difference even more, whether it's real or not. That's kind of like with me. I've got in my warped little noodle that they're better, so to me, since perception is reality, they're better. Which is why I changed them out. There's no real reason to change one out unless you want some extra weight, or you just think they're better, or you think they look better. Either one of those reasons is good, but there's no definite reason why you would have to make the change. The plastic ones work just fine. You ain't even my real dad.